Here's what running a 7-week SEO experiment taught me. It taught me a lot about marketing, about attribution, about SEO, about measuring marketing data, and about how you measure success. Hi, I'm Appy from My Code Happy. I'm a website and data advisor. I help my clients with their websites and with figuring out if their website is working for them. So I just finished a 7-week experiment. I have a client. She's a local women's boutique and she sells perfume. We just ran an experiment to see if we could take some of the perfume that doesn't sell so well online and make it more visible and maybe even get some sales. We made small SEO changes over 6 weeks and we tracked it for 6 weeks plus a further week beyond that to see if we could get any results in making these small changes. Last week, I did a deep dive into the data that we saw over the weeks of the experiment. This week, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what I learned, and here are the lessons. The first lesson is to match your tracking to your goals. I started out tracking keywords. The names of those products were keywords that we were getting impressions for. So I said, well, let's track those keywords as we make these changes and see if we can grow. The problem is that as we made the changes, we started showing up for other keywords, and those weren't getting tracked. So when we looked at the URLs of the products instead of the keywords, we saw a completely different picture. And finally, when we zoomed out a little bit and we started looking at 30 days of data instead of weekly data, that made a difference as well, especially for something like SEO that might take a little bit longer to show up effectively. The longer time frame might be more helpful in seeing what you're looking for. The second lesson was that products can rank for many different keywords. Like I was saying, originally we tracked keywords and then we figured out that we were missing a lot of the visibility where we were seeing growth because we were only looking at the keywords instead of the URLs. We were missing data and missing growth that we could have been tracking because of the way we were tracking. Lesson 3 is that attribution is messy. We would like to say, well, if you come from Facebook and you purchase, then that sale gets attributed to Facebook. But real behavior is messier than that. We see things on a certain channel, we think about it later, maybe we do a Google search, we still don't go buy it, maybe we save it someplace and eventually we directly type the link in and we go to the blog post and then click the product and buy it. And so all of the steps don't get included in that attribution, but they all contributed to the sale. And that doesn't even count things like somebody sent a DM with a link and said, hey, you ought to take a look at this. That's not going to be visible in your attribution. Lesson 4 is that external factors, things you can't control, they are going to have a lot of impact and it's not always easy to measure. Things like what's happening in the world at large, things like a shout out that you get, things like seasonal buying. Those things can affect what's going on, and you don't necessarily know how much of what you're doing is affecting things or how much some of these external factors are controlling what's going on. Strategic wins aren't always obvious. Sometimes you're looking for a straight win, sales increase, but maybe if the percentage of sales of this particular set of products increases against the total sales of the product collection, maybe that's the win that you're looking for. It's not as easy to see, but it goes back to what you're actually trying to do and what your goal is. Correlation is not causation. That's something we hear a lot. We increased visibility for these products overall by more than 150%. But can we say that SEO and the changes we made are why the number of sales increased out of the total number of sales of the collection? We can't say that because we don't know. We have to just say that we don't know because there are so many factors that could contribute to those increased sales. Sometimes preventing a decline is a success. Again, going back to your goal, what if what you're doing prevents sales from declining? Are you going to know? How? But maybe you can say there's external factors and there's risks, and it could be that we could see declining sales and we're not, and so we'll call that a success. It continues to be that being aware of the situation, what's going on, and really being more comfortable with the uncertainty of You can't take two roads at the same time. You can only do the thing and try it and make some assumptions about what could have happened. The system can matter more than an individual channel. And what I mean by that is, say that you improve everything in a particular channel and you do experience more visibility. Is the rest of your system set up to handle that? Do you have an effective website where if more people come from Pinterest, for example, or SEO, as we're talking about, if more people come to your site from that channel, can they purchase effectively? Do the sales buttons work? If any part of your sales system has friction or has parts where people could have a poor experience, then the benefits you might have seen from improving the channel might not pan out because the system isn't there to support it. I learned to track what I can control. Sometimes you track the things that you can't control, but realize the limits of what you can control and the outcomes that you want to see, but maybe you don't have as much control over. Because really, you can control the things you do, the SEO, the number of times you post, where you show up. You can control how your website functions. You can't control whether somebody clicks to purchase or not. So we keep track of sales, we keep track of revenue numbers. We also realize the limitations that those are outcomes that we can't control. We can influence those, but we only control the inputs. Uncertainty can teach more than clarity. When we accept the uncertainty of the things we don't control, we can learn more from that and be more effective. Your time frame of measurement makes a huge difference. For example, this last experiment, we looked at the 30 days before we started the experiment, and then we looked at the 30 days before the day the experiment ended. So from about mid-October to mid-November. And then we also looked at the period from late November to late December, those two 30-day timeframes. And we saw some pretty interesting differences. We saw growth in visibility. We saw growth in clicks. We increased sales of the complete product collection, including the main product that we weren't really testing. And then as a percentage of sales, so the products that we were looking at, the percentage of those sales from the original baseline 30 days to the second 30 days, the percentage almost doubled. The share of sales went from about 15% to almost 30%. That's huge. And that's kind of what we were trying to do. But we zoomed out a little bit more and looked at quarter over quarter from Q4 of 2024 to Q4 of 2025. We had almost exactly the same number of units sold. We went up a little bit in revenue. That's possible because there are full bottle units of perfume and roll-on units for some of the scents. And so obviously the mix changed where we had a few more full bottles sold this time. The number of units stayed about the same. Again, overall, for our suite of test products versus the main product, last year, Q4 was about 80%. This year, Q4, the main product was about 75%. So the suite of products that we're looking at went from about 20% of sales to about 25% of sales. A pretty nice increase, but nothing like the almost doubling that we were looking at from the two 30-day look-back periods. So what's the difference? Well, longer time frame, 90 days versus 30 days, Q4 to Q4 versus both during Q4, but one early in the quarter and one maybe during the peak seasonal Christmas shopping timeframe. So which is more accurate? For the purposes of our experiment, the 30-day look-back periods are probably a little bit more accurate. If you're comparing Q4 to Q4, we only have the final 6 or 7 weeks of this year's Q4 where we were actively improving the SEO. So if we continue to improve it, what is next year's Q4 going to look like? Well, it's going to be affected by external factors. It's going to be affected by whether Western lifestyle is still popular. It's going to be affected by a whole host of things. What we can say is that search is one of the biggest drivers of traffic to the website. It's also one of the biggest drivers of sales. We can say that there's demand out there for these particular scents. So does it make sense to continue putting resources into SEO for these scents? That's where the answer is going to go back to your strategy. If you want help running systematic experiments like this one for your business, where we test whether your marketing channels are working, I'm opening up a few spots for that in January. And in a marketing diagnostic sprint, we'll pick one channel, we'll optimize it systematically for 6 to 9 weeks, depending on your strategy. And at the end, you'll know what's improved, what that means for your business, and what to do next. This is implementation plus analysis, not just a report. And if that sounds interesting, there's a waitlist link in the description. If you have questions, put them in the comments. Thanks for watching. Come back and see me again.